Adele Bates, Behaviour and Education Specialist, and today looking at how do you differentiate for pupils with SEMH or EBD, so social, emotional, mental health issues or emotional behavioural difficulties. So to begin with, statistically, a lot of these pupils will also have special educational learning difficulties that you do need to account for in the same way as you would any pupil. Occasionally, their distressing behaviour in the classroom can sometimes mask this, and teachers are, because they're human, may find it harder to be empathetic with these pupils who display their challenges with the work through negative behaviour. But do look for those first in terms of as a point for your differentiation when it comes to work. Then, aside from that, the first thing that could be really useful to look at is the learning environment. So, all pupils are different, and the reasons behind, or the home lives or history behind why somebody has SEMH or EBD can be completely and utterly different. So the key here, as always, I want to get this as a theme tune actually, is to get to know your pupils, because then you'll know what you need to do. Let's look at the environment. So a really good example is doors. So for some pupils, a locked door can make them feel really safe, and it can make them feel secure, and especially if there's other disruptions going on outside of the classroom, a locked door can be a really good thing for them. On the other hand, for some pupils, a locked door may, unfortunately, trigger some very traumatic past experiences and make them feel trapped. That could be the case for anyone. So when you are arranging, say you've got a mainstream classroom, but you know you've got one or two pupils with SEMH, have the conversation with them. You don't need to guess. So you can just say, whereabouts in this classroom would you feel most safe? Because when the pupils feel safe, guess what? It's easier for them to learn. And this can account for times outside of the classroom as well. So think about your lunch times, break times. Noise can be a particular trigger for some pupils, especially ones who perhaps mix over behavioural challenges along with autism, for example. I work with a lot of pupils for whom the noise can be a really affecting thing for them. Secondly, when it gets to the actual work, although you might not need to adapt for your planning in the same way as you would a learning difficulty, it may be about how they do it and in what order, for example. So in general, and again, I'm saying you need to get to know your pupils, but in general, pupils with SEMH, EBD do struggle with long tasks and long periods of time. So really break those tasks down into chunks, and you can do that even more for them, kind of on the quiet if you need to. I had a pupil in a mainstream class once who was able to articulate that they preferred to sit at the front of the class next to me. Great, kept denying them. And then I just had a timer. So when I set a task for them, I would go up to her separately and say, right, now you need to do question 1 by the time is finished. And it was a 30-second time or whatever it was, so that the tasks were broken down even more for her. And it enabled her to do those bite-sized chunks and get that feeling of accomplishment before going on to the next bit, and the task didn't seem too long for her. Another thing that you might do with adapting work is actually where they do it. For some pupils, actually sitting on a desk for hours can be really hard for them. They may have different physical needs, or you might be able to build those breaks in. You can do it officially, sometimes with a double. I would let the whole class stretch and I'd do yoga sessions with them, much to the chagrin of my year 11 GCSE classes. But there's other ways you can subtly do that as well. Oh, can you just take this book back to the library or whatever? Gives that pupil a built-in break physically. It gives them a mind break, and they haven't got in trouble for it. They've left your classroom, but in a way that is agreed with you. So the third point, let me just get this correct, is about you. How do you differentiate for pupils with SEMH and EBD? They are and can be very, very challenging. They can be aggressive and abusive and very frustrating behaviour to deal with sometimes for staff, and it can really wear down staff morale. There's a vlog I share with a leadership group. It's available on my website, to do with how do we support staff morale when working with challenging and distressing behaviour. So for you, if you're the classroom teacher or if you're a leader in a school, the first kind of bucket that I want to give you is a big bucket of patience. Because as I talk about a lot in my work, and if you've seen the free video series, is seeing the child, not the behaviour. And the behaviour is a way for them to communicate. And although that can be challenging in the moment for you, remembering those kind of things can really, really help you to not take this personally. So if you want more about how to look after yourself, there are other vlogs and blogs that I've written that cover this exactly. Finally, from a school-wide point of view, how do we differentiate for these pupils who perhaps are the ones who are getting thrown out of class for bad behaviour quite frequently, who are getting more of the detentions, etc.? I'm going to give one idea in just the last few minutes of this blog, which is a mirror image of the key worker or key adult type model that's advocated in therapist circles around attachment theory, which is just this idea of these vulnerable pupils having one adult within the school who becomes their key person. So somebody who checks in with them regularly to find out really simple things sometimes. Have they had breakfast? Did they just have an argument with someone? I worked with a pupil once, and the check-in I had with him, I discovered that he hadn't actually slept at home the night before because he'd had an argument with his dad and he'd run away, but he'd still managed to get to school. And if we hadn't have asked him those questions, he would have been punished in the same way and had all the same consequences. But actually what we really had on our hands was a safeguarding issue because he'd run away from home. So having this key worker to get to know the pupil even better, but also to advocate on behalf of them within the school can be a really good start to differentiating and supporting these very vulnerable pupils. I am sure you all have loads of ideas because we need as many ideas as there are pupils because they are all different. I look forward to hearing about it. Thank you. Bye bye.